The GameCube is one of Nintendo's most peculiar consoles. Despite the fact that the console wasn't super successful during its heyday in the early to mid 2000s, since its release in 2001, it's managed to develop a dedicated following amongst gamers, to the point where the console is still relevant in the gaming community over 20 years later. For Nintendo fans especially, the GameCube era is looked back on as a golden age of Nintendo. Everyone speaks about the console with so much esteem. Other Nintendo consoles are looked back on fondly, like the Nintendo 64 and the Game Boy, but at least in my experience, I don't see them held in as high regard. Even Nintendo consoles that existed in the same era as the GameCube, like the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo DS, don't elicit that same response. Personally, I didn't have a GameCube growing up, but I did have a Wii, and thanks to the backwards compatibility, I did get to experience several GameCube games when I was younger. I do have some personal attachment to the console, however, I'm not exactly a GameCube aficionado, so I decided to ask GameCube fans what they loved about the console. This person said, "The shape and color. It's just a cute little box." This is actually pretty interesting. When new consoles are revealed, there usually is some talk about the appearance of the console itself, but it's not really something that people talk about much after the fact. Most consoles are kind of flat and rectangular, but the GameCube has this iconic box design that's thick but small at the same time. The color is another unique part of the GameCube. It wasn't gray or black or white like most consoles, it was a really unique purple color. I know technically it's indigo, but I don't know, when I look at the GameCube I see purple, but anyway, this unique color makes the GameCube instantly recognizable. But hey, even if you didn't like indigo, the cool thing about the GameCube was that there were multiple different colors you could pick from. This is something that not a ton of home consoles do. It's more prevalent with handhelds, but being able to pick the color of your console is really cool. You can kind of show off your personality with the color you chose. If you were kinda low-key and simple, maybe you'd go for jet black. If you were kinda quirky and fun, maybe you'd go for indigo. If you were fancy and you liked your stuff to have a bit more bling, then maybe you'd go for the limited edition platinum. There were quite a few special colors for the GameCube, like the Japanese Spice Orange GameCube. They released the Spice Orange controllers outside of Japan, but for some reason, North America and Europe didn't get the full orange consoles themselves. Someone else brought up another interesting part of the GameCube's design: the handle. The GameCube just has this handle on the back to make the console easier to carry. It's not really something you realize you want until it's right there, but yeah, this is really cool. Video game consoles are meant to stay in one place for long periods of time, usually right by your TV, but occasionally you have to move your consoles, and the handle just adds an extra bit of convenience. I think the handle especially makes sense for the GameCube because of the console's library of games. This person said, "They don't make couch co-op like they used to." Another person said, "It was the console we played for game nights with 3+ friends. Melee, Double Dash, Mario Party, Super Monkey Ball, WarioWare, Alien Hominid PDA mode, Donkey Konga." Someone else said, "In an era mostly before online gaming, I think the GameCube sweeps the competition in terms of a multiplayer library too, at least for party games." The GameCube had a big library of multiplayer games, which meant it was probably a console you'd take over friends' houses or to parties. That handle gave it that extra portability for those moments. While the other consoles in the 6th generation did have plenty of multiplayer games, the GameCube really felt like a multiplayer console. The PS2 only had 2 controller ports. If you wanted to play games that supported more than 2 players at the same time, you'd need a multi-tap accessory. The Xbox did have 4 controller ports, but I don't really know of too many local multiplayer games with 3+ players that the Xbox was known for. Of course, there was the Dreamcast, which did have 4 controller ports as well, but that console was literally discontinued before the GameCube or the Xbox even came out, so it didn't really have much time at all to build a library, and sometimes I find it hard to view the Dreamcast as even being in the same category as the other 6th generation consoles, because it was discontinued so early. While we're talking about multiplayer games, we should talk about the GameCube's library as a whole. This person said, "It has such heavy hitters like Super Mario Sunshine, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Animal Crossing, Pokemon Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness, Mario Kart Double Dash, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, etc. Like, if a friend told me if he's getting a GameCube for the first time and which games to recommend, it would take forever to list them." Another person said, "The best thing about the GameCube for me are the games. The GameCube has a nice library of games based on different genres. You want a rhythm game? Donkey Konga and Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix. Platformers? Billy Hatcher, Mario Sunshine, Sonic Heroes, and Wario World. Games that are more exploration-based? Pikmin, Luigi's Mansion, and Chibi Robo. Action? Wind Waker, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, Beautiful Joe, and Gotcha Force, etc. Every game on the system just felt very unique in both style and identity without feeling the same. The GameCube definitely has a reputation of being a party game machine, but it also had a great selection of single-player stuff to complement those games. After a long afternoon of racing your buddies in Kirby Air Ride or ruining friendships in Mario Party, maybe you'd want some alone time to just explore Hyrule in Twilight Princess, or battle aliens in Metroid Prime, or go on high-speed adventures in Sonic Adventure DX. This person said, the pure experimentation with games. Another person said, the huge variety of games and experimentation that companies these days would never even attempt to do. You'd only really see a game like Eternal Darkness from indie devs these days. Nearly every major Nintendo franchise apart from Mother got a big release that's considered one of, if not the best in their respective series. A lot of GameCube games were strange and experimental. You had Mario Sunshine, which drastically altered the 3D Mario gameplay by giving Mario a water cannon to use. You had Zelda Wind Waker, which infamously changed the Zelda art style to something cel-shaded and cartoony. You had Mario Kart Double Dash, which had tag kart racing instead of single kart racing. You had Pokemon Colosseum, which was a 3D Pokemon RPG, something the mainline games wouldn't do until 10 years later in 2013 with Pokemon X and Y. And the mainline games wouldn't do a home console RPG until 15 years later with Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. The GameCube really did have a ton of games that tried different things, but GameCube games weren't the only games that the console could play. This person said, probably Nintendo's largest and most consistent high-quality library of first-party / second-party software for a single home console platform they've made, coupled with far better third-party support than you think, especially as compared to the Nintendo 64 and Wii U. Not to mention support for the Game Boy Player, which effectively made 4/5 of the GameCube's library, all prior and newly released Nintendo Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. The Game Boy Player allowing you to play games from all three of the Game Boy line's consoles drastically increased the GameCube's library of playable titles. You also had the benefit of being able to play all of the games on a TV, which even for particularly small TVs would have been far bigger than a tiny GBA screen. The only downside was that the games didn't look the best when played through the Game Boy Player, but it was still a cool accessory nonetheless. And that's honestly just really awesome. But obviously, you're gonna need a controller to play all of those games. This person said, the controller. I love the GameCube controller so much that I bought 3 of them for the Switch too. And yes, of course, indigo is the best color. Another person said, the controller. It's one of my favorites next to the PS3's controller. The C-stick on the GameCube controller could be bigger and the D-pad not as stiff, but other than that, it's a great controller. Someone else said in reference to the GameCube controller, it retains the geometry of the N64 controller grips, but uses a PSX style button layout, making everything available / reachable without adjusting your grip. Ergonomically, it's basically perfect. The C-stick should have just been another analog stick, and the absence of a left shoulder button seems like an odd design choice, but with a few tweaks, it could have been perfect, and should have been what future controllers were modeled on. Yeah, I agree. There's a reason why the GameCube controller is so beloved. The GameCube controller just fits so perfectly in your hands. My favorite parts are the concave shoulder buttons that feel super comfortable on your index fingers. As was mentioned by people in the comments, it's not perfect. The tiny D-pad, the nubby C-stick, and the lack of a bumper button on the left shoulder to complement the Z button on the right shoulder are pretty noticeable flaws. But when it comes to just pure comfort in your hands, the GameCube controller is fantastic. The GameCube, even over 20 years after it came out, remains one of Nintendo's most beloved consoles. Its great library, controller, and design made it a timeless system that still maintains relevance in gaming even to this day. It was really cool to see what made everyone fall in love with the console, and now after making this video, I'm feeling in the mood for a little Metroid Prime. Thanks for watching y'all, and have a great rest of your day.